During the time that Chase and Harriman were acquiring property to build these developments, sometimes they were able to buy an entire farm from a farmer that was going to be flooded for the reservoir. So they accumulated acres and acres, and actually in Vermont it's just over 16,000 acres that provide the reservoir areas and lands that are near the river and riverine areas and things. During the course of that operating license, the folks thought that it would be nice to have this conserved for a period of time, and over the course of those discussions it was decided to have a conservation restriction that was in perpetuity. So as long as there's a hydro license and a hydro operator operating these lands and owning these facilities, that land will be conserved. Up around Harriman Reservoir, around Somerset Reservoir, those lands around those, they're protected now forever and ever due to this conservation easement. It's a wonderful thing. Never be developed.
The Watershed Initiative was a collaborative effort to get as many people involved in each of the 27 watersheds in Massachusetts in looking at the watershed as a whole and trying to come up with, from the ground up, some solutions on how to manage and improve or maintain the environment, not just the water quality, but habitat quality, increase environmental education, provide some resources for the locals to manage their watershed in the best way possible for the environment. Most of the towns, before we started the initiative, did not have a current open space plan for their town. So we were able to fund not only local open space plans, but we also did a watershed-wide open space plan. The difference when you're looking at a local open space plan as opposed to a regional open space plan is that the towns can work together to collaborate on connecting. Say they're trying to save a parcel of land and it crosses the town boundaries. Those kinds of things to actually leverage on each other's ability to fund it and to manage it. And sometimes it takes an effort to get a land parcel preserved. So those kinds of regional efforts are, I believe, much more effective in protecting. It's not all piecemeal. It's more like a watershed-wide, thinking of what happens in a watershed, not just that it ends at a boundary somewhere. In the Deerfield, there is some agricultural activities going on along the river as well as in some of the upland tributaries. It's not pervasive, but occasionally you'll find poor management practices where the cows are left to wander through the stream or nearby the stream. They're not completely fenced out of the bank area. So there's a bunch of things that can happen. You can just get the erosion from the cows walking up and down the bank. That creates a sediment problem in the river. And of course, if the cows are hanging out in the river, you get cow manure in the river, and that creates a problem not only for bacteria, but for nutrients. Another problem sometimes is over-fertilizing fields, that if it doesn't get used by the plants, it goes right into the river or the nearby water. Another source that sometimes can be a localized problem is logging. There's a lot of logging that goes on in the Deerfield. For the most part, the loggers are really good about managing how they treat the land, but sometimes you get the occasional problem with running the skidders through the stream or not properly covering the land after you remove the trees, so you get a lot of runoff of sediment into the streams. One of the issues that causes non-point source pollution is runoff from dirt roads, and in the Deerfield watershed there's a ton of dirt roads that either parallel a stream or cross a stream at some point, and especially during rain events, you get a lot of sediment from these dirt roads just washing in and clogging either the culverts that run under the road itself, or just filling in the stream with the sediment that screws up fish habitat for the most part. Right now, the Deerfield's in pretty good shape compared to a lot of the eastern watersheds. As it becomes more developed, more urbanized, those problems that the eastern watersheds are seeing are ultimately going to be affecting the Deerfield. So it's important to think about that ahead of time and get some measures in place so that when it happens, things are well planned for and managed intelligently, not just haphazardly.
With the Adopt a Stream program, we work with citizen groups throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to survey river segments and to implement actions to protect their local waterways. And in the Deerfield, we've had 4 stream teams, one along the Green River here, and also along the South, North, and Chickley rivers. Through the shoreline surveys, trash was noted as one of the problems that was identified. Concerns about erosion, particularly where infrastructure was involved, near roadways and where people had septic systems or other things, which would be a concern. And also, there was a couple pipes that people identified as suspicious, either because they had a foul odor or some type of discharge that maybe had a discoloration or had some other indicator that there might be a problem. As part of the process, we actually do a training with our volunteers, and part of the training is we talk about what makes a river healthy and talk about some of the watershed concepts. And a lot of times folks are unaware that they connect into the larger watersheds. I mean, here on the Green River flows into the Deerfield River, which then flows into the Connecticut and ultimately into Long Island Sound. So a lot of times it's a new concept for people, and what's great is when they make that connection, they often see how some of the activities that they may participate in could all of a sudden become a larger watershed issue when you include everybody else that may be dealing with some of the same issues. One of our major goals as the Adopt a Stream program is really to get folks involved with their local waterway. With over 3,000 miles of rivers and streams in Massachusetts, it's impossible for everybody to get out and monitor every single section without having some local volunteers who can go out and walk their streams and really get to know them, and who can watch the stream over time. Water quality samples, it's usually just taking what's happening that particular day, but things happen throughout the year, various water levels, when potential for discharges different according to the year. So it's always helpful to have people that can go back over and over again to check out the local waterway.
So today, October 4th, is the Green River Cleanup. Actually, it's the Source to Sea Cleanup. It's a program that the Connecticut River Watershed Council started years ago, where we actually go to rivers and clean them up, get the trash out. And our group kind of adopts the Green River, which is a tributary to the Deerfield, and get a whole bunch of people to come for just this day to get the trash out of the river, and that in itself is good, but we feel like it gives our group some visibility, and they actually see where the river is in their neighborhood, because in Greenfield anyway, the river is kind of hidden behind buildings and whatnot. So now they know where it is, and they see that maybe there's problems with it. The association was started in '89 when the utilities were working on relicensing their dams. And so the Deerfield Watershed Association was a part of the Deerfield River Compact. And so we were instrumental in making sure that the interests of the river itself were protected in the agreement with the utilities. And since then, we've been kind of the steward of the river. I'll tell you, an association like ours grows when there's a problem. It gets created when there's a problem, and it grows when there's a problem, and people flock. So in a way, the fact that we're small is good news, because that means there's not really that many problems with the Deerfield River. It's one of the prettiest and cleanest rivers in the state. So in a way, I would really like to grow. I'd like to have more members, but I don't want this to happen because something horrible happens to the river.
I've been on with the association for about 4 years now, and my role with them is the water quality monitoring coordinator. And in that role, I help to essentially coordinate a number of water quality monitoring activities on an annual basis here. For the last number of years, up until 2007, we were performing summertime bacteria monitoring so as to determine which areas within certain water bodies were deemed safe for swimming and which shouldn't be used at a particular time. And then we engage every fall in our biomonitoring efforts, and this is an entirely volunteer effort. We use a standard methodology whereby we head out to a stream reach and we use what's called a kick net. And we head into the river and we kick the critters from the river bottom into these nets, and we take the contents from the nets, preserve them, taken back to a lab and we identify what's in those samples, and then we, based on what's in those samples, we can determine how healthy the community is in that particular reach by comparing what's there to what's in a reach that we know supports a healthy community because it's got the cleanest water quality and the best physical habitat that we can find locally. And we deem those cleanest reaches our reference reaches. Everything else is compared to those reference reaches. Macroinvertebrates are the smaller organisms without backbones in our rivers and streams. They tend to be well represented by aquatic insects, mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies. They're also well represented by worms, freshwater mollusks like snails and clams. And some of those macroinvertebrates are more sensitive to different types of disturbances such as water quality impairment or physical habitat degradation than are others. So by coming out here and examining what's here and what's not here, we can generate a pretty accurate snapshot of what the overall condition of that particular reach of river is based on the fact that the benthic communities, that is the communities that live on the river bottom, they integrate the effects of these different types of stressors.
We have a stonefly and a dragonfly larva here. Generally speaking, these stoneflies are much less tolerant to various types of disturbance than the dragonflies are. This stonefly is called Pteronarcis, and they'll spend about 3 years living in the river as larvae. That's 3 years before they emerge as adults and spend a single summer season as an adult. So these are relatively long-lived critters. The more different types of critters we have, that is, as we have larger numbers of different types of critters in our streams, that tends to indicate better conditions. This stream has quite a few different types of critters, including quite sensitive ones like these Pteronarcis mayflies. You won't find these in waters that are heavily polluted or otherwise degraded. So the presence of this critter and several others that we have in the net indicate good water quality here. They're quite intolerant to different types of disturbance.
In more impaired water bodies that might be affected by elevated temperatures or elevated sediment loads or elevated nutrient loading, you would expect to see a shift in the types and numbers of macroinvertebrates towards those that are less sensitive to these types of disturbances. And those are aquatic worms, for example. Some mollusks are quite tolerant to disturbance. And a lot of what we call dipterans, the true flies, such as crane flies, mosquitoes, the midges, what we scientists call chironomids. So those critters tend to occur in high abundance in areas that are disturbed. Our efforts in some ways could be seen as efforts to further the efforts on the part of the state agencies who are scattered statewide, but we can focus right here in the watershed. Perhaps in another 15, 20 years, we'll have some very comprehensive data sets that will be able to speak with confidence to changes in watershed conditions. And both watershed-wide, as far as the average condition throughout the Deerfield River watershed, as well as conditions in particular water bodies.